You're listening to First Fossil. Because sometimes you simply need someone to help you take that first fossil. Hello and welcome to First Fossil, a show where we learn together how to take that first fossil toward becoming the best versions of ourselves. My name is Candace Olusola, and today we're discussing the novel coronavirus from the perspective of professors and lecturers in different colleges, grad schools, and professional school programs across the U.S. And the reason why I'm doing this episode is because I think there's been a lot of misconceptions, a bit of confusion about what educators have been going through and how they've been affected, what has actually happened in their transition process, how they're thinking about it, and a whole bunch of other things. So although we've all been thrown into this and it all feels like we're all going through the same thing, it hasn't been the same for everyone. And so I wanted to shed light from the educational standpoint. And I'm really curious to hear what today's educators have to say about what they're going through in their personal experience. So I have 5 educators with me, and I'll let each one of them introduce themselves in just a minute. But first, I just want to welcome them to the show. So hi guys, welcome to First Fossil. How's everyone doing today?
Great, Candace.
Good. You guys are from different schools and different types of programs, and so I'm really glad that we're going to get a wide variety of topics and different discussions, different angles on how this has been for educators, because I've been seeing a lot of opinion out there, and it's coming from the standpoint of people who are not in the education system. So thank you guys for being willing to kind of shed light on some of the things that are happening in a wide variety of sectors in the education system. How about you guys go around and each introduce yourselves and say your name, what your institution is, where that school is located, and what you teach for that institution.
All right, thanks, Candace. I am Jennifer Daddiesman. I teach at the University of Kentucky in Lexington, Kentucky, in the United States. My official title is lecturer in biostatistics. I teach 2 undergraduate biostatistics courses each semester. There's a 200-level Intro to Biostats course and a 300-level Analytics course. And actually, both courses are flipped, so the lectures are online and then class time is devoted to in-class activities. So it's not a traditional statistics class like you would think of.
Nice.
I'm Grace Lozon. I am a board-certified music therapist. I teach at West Virginia University in Morgantown, West Virginia, United States. And I teach first-year introductory music therapy courses. And I'm also a practicum supervisor for music therapy students at the pre-intern level. Occasionally, I will also supervise interns. But right now, internships are stalled for unique reasons. But yeah, other than my main music therapy job, those are the courses that I teach.
Awesome. Thanks, Grace.
Howdy, I'm Anthony Bosman. I'm an assistant professor of mathematics at Andrews University in Southwest Michigan. I teach a variety of math classes, everything from the gen ed, intro to math classes to some of the more advanced upper level math classes for our math majors. And I also really enjoy working with our undergraduates doing research projects in low dimensional topology, which is my research area.
Nice. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Hassan Ahmed, and I'm an adjunct professor at George Washington University at their campus in Ashburn, Virginia. And I teach an Introduction to Health IT class as part of their undergraduate program there.
Thanks.
And lastly, I'm Melody Ryan. I'm a professor at the University of Kentucky College of Pharmacy, and I'm also the brand new assistant provost for global health initiatives at the University of Kentucky in Lexington, Kentucky. So pleasure to be here, Candace.
Nice. Thank you guys so much for your introductions and sharing a little bit about what you guys do in your universities. So let's start off with kind of talking about how we, announcement novel coronavirus, pandemic, everyone needs to leave the schools. So I just want to understand how that process worked for you guys. What was going on? What season of the semester were you guys in? And just like kind of walk me through your different perspectives. Hassan, do you want to start?
Sure. So I teach just the one class as part of the spring 2020 semester, and so it's an in-person class, and so we're starting the class, and then pretty much right as we started is kind of when the talk had started to come of COVID-19 and everything that's happening. And so it's an 8-week class, and we meet twice a week. So after the first week, 2 class sessions, we basically got an email saying that in the next few weeks, we're going to have to transition to an online class. So I started to prepare the students and let them know. And then pretty much by the second week, after I had 2 more class sessions, they actually bumped up the date even earlier, and then we had to go to online classes right away. So I only had 2 weeks of in-person class sessions, and the other 6 weeks were then online after that. So it was a pretty quick turnaround. I just started to get to know the faces to my students' names, and then had to go through that transition pretty quickly after that.
That's a lot to figure out. And I see, like, I'm sure you guys probably went through something similar. Was it the same for you guys at Andrews?
Yeah, so fortunately, we got in 10 weeks of in-person instruction before we went remote. And so I was able to have about 2/3 of my class in person. So I felt like I really connected with them, bonded with them. But I do remember the week we transitioned and just how rapidly it happened. And it was on a Tuesday that we had our first reported case of coronavirus in the state of Michigan. That same date, the governor declared a state of emergency. The next day, that Wednesday, we declared we would be going online. That Friday, we started our spring break. And so we just didn't come back from spring break. All the students went home from spring break. Some stayed in the dorms, a small number, but they went home, and from spring break, we moved to remote instruction. And so that last week of classes, preparing to go on to spring break, preparing to move to remote was quite rapid. It was quite disruptive. It felt like every couple of days, there was a whole new imagining what the semester would look like. But fortunately, I was able to get in a good 10 weeks with the students before we moved to the remote education.
Wow. Okay. Man. Melody, how was that for you guys at the College of Pharmacy? Because I think you guys were, and I think Jen, you guys were also going on spring break at that time. So what was going on there?
Yeah, exactly. So we had a very similar situation to Andrews University, in that we had everyone went home on Wednesday and never came back.
Oh.
So we have students all over the country, and in some cases the world, doing remote learning with basically we went to that overnight. So I think we were fortunate in that we had about a week to really think about how it was going. I can tell you for me, because I had a couple of administrative positions in the college, that week was full of meetings, nonstop, morning to night, on Zoom, into the night, on Zoom, the entire week. And that didn't let up till about 2 weeks ago. I feel like I've been rooted to a Zoom meeting.
Wow. Okay. Jen, was that similar for you too?
Similar, yes. Yeah, we got the notification the week before spring break. I think it was Wednesday, Tuesday maybe. It was right before spring break that we were going to be online. It was originally announced for the 2 weeks after spring break. And then a few days later, they switched it for the entire semester. So the last time I saw my students was right before spring break, in person, I should say. So we left for spring break, and that was it.
There it was.
We all switched to online. Very similar, but again, lucky to have those that first half of the semester with the students in person.
Yeah. Grace, what was going on for you?
Very similar. So spring break was the week after things have happened. It was mid-March, and actually faculty and students received the same email notification at the same time. So we had no advance notice. So the rest of the music therapy team and I scrambled to get a base contingency plan in place, and we shared it with our students the next day. We went over everything that's happening, what we know, our contingency plan, and the students really appreciated that we had something in place, because one of my freshmen actually said, "You're the first professor that I've heard actually has a plan." I'm like, "Well, we're music therapists. This is something we do." Not to say anything bad about the rest of the WVU music administration, but it's hard because how do you do online music?
Right.
How do you do that? And so what WVU actually did, they had regular spring break, then we added an extended spring break because we did not know at the time if we would not be allowed to come back to campus. So it was meant to be a sort of a pseudo quarantine. And then the announcement was made that all learning would go to remote. So again, yes, it did buy us some time to revise the syllabi, but at the same time, it pushed some assignments forward and we lost a week. So for the assignments we had, they kind of got crammed in together. And so thinking about how to redesign some portions of the course. Something else that I did was I sent out a survey to my students just to see, do you have access to internet? If you're using a smartphone, do you have data restrictions? Do you have all of your basic needs? Do you need access to counseling? Are there any other measures we can take, like transcripts of lectures, synchronous meetings, things like that? So that's what I did in that extended spring break to kind of prepare and have things ready to go in case of an emergency.
Okay.
We had a similar experience of extending a spring break by a week, which was good because it gave the faculty more time to prepare to go remote. So I spent some of that time building a studio so I could do recordings and put out some high quality recordings for my students.
Right.
And it was kind of fun, as someone interested in pedagogy. I'd always wanted to have a nice studio where I could make these light board recordings and do these cool math talks. But the challenge with that is it meant that we kept having to redesign our curriculums, because going into spring break, I'd redesigned my classes for 5 weeks left of remote learning. And then I found out a few days later, we'd have 4 weeks of remote learning. So you redesign your classes again. And then once you go remote, you figure out it's not what you expect. So then you have to redesign all your classes a third time while they're happening to troubleshoot all that's going on. And so I know many faculty, it's like, it's enough trouble to design your class once for the semester. We design it 2 or 3 times while the semester is taking place.
I'm overwhelmed just hearing that. 'Cause, as someone who's, taught and had to lesson plan and not knowing the ins and outs of even internet, I have a lot of professors who aren't very tech savvy by themselves. So the idea of them also having to figure out how to put it all online, figure out how to add all these extra pieces to make sure every student gets what they need while they're gone, and then not knowing if the information is going to change as the pandemic progresses. So hats off to all of you and your colleagues for going through this. You and Grace are talking about having students who have to do internships and rotations and how this affects them. How was that for you, trying to process not only getting the classwork stuff, but also probably trying to help students who needed to do their practicums or their internships or their rotations in order to graduate? Because I'm sure that was chaotic as well.
Indeed it was. So we were fortunate in that many of our preceptors pulled out all the stops to keep our students still on rotation, whether that was having remote discussions with them or doing journal clubs remotely. The ones that were in community pharmacies, of course, they actually needed more help, so they were delighted to have people as people tried to get more prescriptions. But then we had a number of institutions that said that student learners couldn't be present anymore. So that was a big challenge. Our experiential team worked, no kidding, around the clock for 2 weeks. Wow. And are still getting institutions that are pulling people. So that has been a big, big challenge. With my involvement in international education, I feel like it was good and bad. It was bad, of course, that students had to be pulled from international locations. Luckily, none of my students, but that team also worked around the clock to get those folks home. The good part about that was because I was carefully watching the international situation. I felt like I had about a month lead time on everyone else. Like I had my case of toilet paper ordered a month before anything became in a shortage here. So from that standpoint, I felt like I had a little bit of a heads up. I was anticipating we might be on quarantine. But of course, it's super disappointing to students who are planning to study abroad this year that they're not getting to go. So we're trying to shift to some virtual international experiences. And actually, I've spent the better part of the last week putting together a COVID-19 course to look at country responses to the pandemic.
That is cool.
So trying to make some lemonade out of lemons here.
Yeah, that's innovative and a lot of work, but kudos for even thinking about something like that. And especially with the pharmacy program, I'm sure that's like, I would be eating something like that up like candy. Like, that sounds so fun in the midst of learning about medicine. So, but you, Grace, you also have students who are having to do practicums and whatnot.
Yes. So if anyone doesn't already know about music therapy, in order to reach the point of internship, and then after that, passing your board certification exam, you do have to have a certain number of hours before going into internship. And those hours come from time in the classroom, specifically devoted to clinical foundations, techniques, approaches, and then also field work, clinical work, where you are supervised by a music therapist. And so I had some students working at the clinic that I operate, and for actually the whole class, they all had to be pulled from their sites because, number one, telehealth services were not set up there yet. And that's something else that has been another journey. I actually did a guest lecture on telehealth for our practicum class, because that's something I'm using in my clinic. But no telehealth, no in-person services for the safety of the clients, and for our students, it would be a liability. So we've had to come up with alternate assignments that are still within the realm of what our national organization says can count as hours, because we're restricted. We can't try and cheat the system. If you watch a telehealth video, that doesn't count for clinical hours, sorry. So unfortunately, our senior students are going to be low on hours. They're going to get the short end of the stick. So trying to figure out how we can support them moving forward in the fall. Because in the best case scenario, we could say, well, that's all right, we'll do summer practicum. Nope, can't do that either.
Right.
So it's been a challenge to make sure that we're still giving them the highest quality academic therapeutic content, and that they're still learning, but within the parameters of our national organization. Because it is really hard with music therapy when so much of it is done in person with interpersonal connections. That experience is different. How much are they really learning from it? Same with doing things in the classroom. I know a few of us beforehand were talking about experiential learning. When that's taken away, how does that change the learning outcome and their concrete understanding of things?
Right.
It's different to see someone else write out something on the board as opposed to you doing it yourself.
Right.
We had a similar challenge with labs in the sciences.
Mm-hmm.
So, so much of the scientific labs are hands-on. And when we went remote, a lot of what it looked was just recording the professor doing the lab, right? So it's a video, it's just not the same. But now that as we're going into summer, we have a number of summer classes like summer physics that we're teaching. And we've been able to think through it a little bit more carefully. And I'm really impressed with what the physics department have done. They've decided to mail out lab kits to every student. So about $200 they spent for each student on lab supplies they sent out to each student. And the result is the number of students in our summer physics actually doubled. And so we were afraid nobody would want to do physics online because how do you do with the labs? But they seem to have figured out a way to do it. And I don't think it's quite the same as an on-campus experience, but it's still going to be better than just recordings of watching someone else do the experiments.
Yeah.
So, Anthony, one thing I've been wondering about regarding labs, because of course we have them as well, is thinking about when we do resume class, if we have to use social distancing and so on, would it be possible to use some like gamification, some esports kind of techniques, so that they could practice techniques at home or practice experiments at home, and then when they came in, maybe wouldn't need so much actual hands-on time in the lab, Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really neat idea. And there's some cool platforms that do things like this. It's just those platforms take quite a bit of investment. And so that's where the uncertainty of the situation comes in. If we know we're going to need social distancing protocols for the next 2 or 3 semesters, then we're going to make the investment. It's the question of when you don't know if it's worth it or not, right? So I think the uncertainty is what compounds the difficulty of solving all of these problems.
Wow, that is great. That is so innovative. The things that you guys are starting to pick up on and realize, I hope that the things that are being figured out during this season are not thrown away once things are kind of back to a normal where everyone's actually in the classroom setting, but all of those different techniques kind of are used to help broaden how we're teaching our classes in person, with all of these changes, you're having to process things. How is that just affecting your day-to-day life? Like, I mean, you guys are professors. In a regular day, you guys are lesson planning, you guys are teaching, you're having office hours, you also have a life outside of school when you're not doing all those things. How has that affected you guys personally that maybe students wouldn't necessarily realize from that perspective? How about you, Jen?
Well, I am an introvert by nature, which when I've told my students this and they think I'm lying because I get up in front of them and talk. I also reveal to them that I'm extremely shy. Like, none of you can see me who's listening to this podcast. The rest of you all can. But I am turning red because I don't like talking in front of people. I don't know. But with teaching, it's different. And so the way I decompress is as I'm walking to and from class. I'm mentally preparing myself walking to class. I'm decompressing walking back from class. It's a time for my brain to process what's happened. And I don't have that with Zoom calls. I don't have that with Zoom class. So just in my experience, going from Zoom class to Zoom office hours to basically lunch, I mean, that's my entire morning, some mornings, is just completely fatiguing in a way that I never thought it would be. And I know the students are probably going through something similar if they have to attend class multiple times in a day via Zoom. So, I mean, that's really been my personal experience, is just trying to find a way to have those moments. And so what I started doing a few weeks into the semester when I figured this out was just taking the time I would normally take to walk to class. I'd start up Zoom and just put my away up, and I would take a walk around my apartment, or I'd go do something else. And that helped with that mental thing, that even though I wasn't physically walking to the classroom or walking back after, that's what I would do. And it really helped with that sort of transition. Like, I'm getting ready to go sit on Zoom for class now. So that was the biggest change for me, was just the amount of mental fatigue that happened.
Yeah. How about you, Hassan? Because I know you don't just teach. You have your own podcast, so it's not like you don't have side projects that you can't work on or whatever to kind of fill in the space. But even with that, it's still different. So how have you been processing it for yourself and transitioning?
Yeah, definitely. It was an interesting challenge because, I work for a health system. I do data analytics work full time. So this was just something I did like Wednesday evening and Saturday morning as this class that I would teach. And so through this, we're also transitioning to working from home for the health system that I work for, and obviously trying to deal with COVID-19 and reporting and analytics for that as well alongside all this. And so, that was an interesting challenge, coupled with the fact that, when I started teaching this class last year, and I did a whole lot of lesson planning and had everything built out. So when I was offered the position again this year to teach it again, I thought I have all the material ready, should be, much more straightforward, not knowing, of course, all the adapting that I would have to do and the time investment, because of the situation. So trying to just do some time management there was a little bit of a a challenge. But overall, I think, luckily, I love technology, and this class is also revolved around technology and healthcare, so it was very timely in that sense. So a lot of, relevance that I could apply to the class. And so for the most part, I didn't have to transition too much, but I did have to keep in mind certain things about, we had guest speakers that were going to come to the class. So making sure that they have access to also join the classes virtually and present. Our exams were going to be, administered in person. So just trying to build those out online and test these tools that I hadn't used before, like the Respondus lockdown browser, which will restrict students into only utilizing, the exam on Blackboard and not going to other websites, that sort of thing. So it was spending the time to try and test all this stuff out, all these tools that I hadn't had to use before, and make sure that went smoothly through this transition. So, overall, at the end of the day, it actually thankfully went pretty smoothly. And so I think it was just a matter of just trying to look ahead at my schedule and try and, make sure that I reached out to the guest speakers ahead of time, built the exams ahead of time, and just really tried to prep and make sure that when the day came for those things, that everything went smoothly.
So have there been wait, what were you going to say, Anthony? You were going to say something in response?
Well, I was just thinking about, we had this meeting where they announced the faculty and staff that were going remote. And while they announced this, I turned to a colleague and I said, I'm going to get so much research done. With all the students off campus, I'm going to be so productive. And the reality is, because I thought it'd be an easy thing, I'll log onto Zoom, I'll teach a couple hours a day, I'd have the rest of the time for research. But my teaching time has probably doubled, right? I've just spent so much more time teaching, and I've had zero time for research in the last 5 weeks while we've been doing this. And I think my colleagues who either have kids that are now homeschooling, or they have elderly parents that they're caring for, right? And we're a very international university. So I have students in Korea, students in Europe, students in the East Coast, West Coast, and all over. And so, and they all need attention, and you sympathize for the circumstances. And so you want to make accommodations for them. But it means, you're up early in the morning till 3 a.m. answering emails. This last week was finals week. And we did these online exams with the lockdown browser. And I'd spent so much time troubleshooting, doing the Geek Squad. I felt like, I was now tech support, right? I was doing so much time just doing tech troubleshooting because so many students had different issues. Their internet connection died halfway through the exam. They got booted out and then they couldn't access it. Or there's so many issues like this just arose. And I'm still teaching summer class right now, but it's a much smaller class. I'm grateful for that. But I think what compounds this is the uncertainty that's surrounded around a number of professional matters for faculty. So for instance, I had a significant grant I was awarded for this summer, and I still don't know what if it's going to come through or not, because it was tied to doing research with students on campus. And obviously I can't do that component. And so, I'm still waiting to hear back from the funding agency, but there's these other components, or a number of universities. This has intensified a number of financial challenges the universities have. And so for a lot of us who are maybe not tenured or in adjunct faculty, you're thinking about job security. You see a lot of universities right now are talking about laying off faculty, either just on a temporary basis or perhaps permanently to make budget cuts. And so there's a lot of big questions of job security, of am I even still going to be in this job in a couple of weeks? And so I think that intensifies the challenge for us.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about the research piece and how that's because so many faculty are involved in research. So I can't imagine, especially if you have a lot of students on your research team and then all of a sudden they can't be anywhere near you for who knows how long. Then it's so my whole research is on halt. What do I do with this? That is stressful. And a lot of schools get paid because of the research that's done. So it's just there's financial pieces involved, and there's technological pieces involved, and logistics, and I think these are even things that I hadn't thought of. So I can't imagine other people are realizing that there's a lot more going on than what we are seeing or even hearing. Are you guys seeing any forums where teachers have just been what are you doing? I have no idea what's going on. I'm making it up. you know?
I will say I'm part of a Facebook group, Music Therapy Faculty, and it's been a really nice way to get validation and see that, no, I'm not just being needy. I'm not freaking out unnecessarily. This is real and it's happening to lots of people. And just also seeing the differences in programs between universities, even if it's in the same subject. So again, going back to what Anthony said, how the university as a whole and departments are built differently or structured differently. And so the internal mechanisms, it might be just different enough where, I don't know. Yes, as far as forums, yes. But on the other hand, as far as hearing things from my university, because I am just adjunct, it takes a little trail that gets all the way down to me. And then by the time I hear about it, it's like, oh, okay.
Right. You just receive it. It's like, okay, that's fine. It's comforting. I can see how it's comforting. It can probably also be very confusing and slightly frustrating trying to just maneuver everything, even if you are reaching out to other lecturers and professors across the nation to see what they're doing. And the differences in programs probably just makes it a little bit more complicated as well. How has it been for you guys as far as things that are affecting your calendar year? Because I know there's things that, Melody, we go on medical brigades every year. That's something that has had to kind of play it by ear based on what that country is doing. And there are conferences that you're supposed to go on to represent the school, and those are getting canceled. And there are CEs, or people have to get continuing education, and some of those are not, following through. How has that been for you guys as far as your professions and what you have to do to, maintain what you do as a lecturer or a professor? Is that something that has been talked about a lot in your universities or in your situations?
I will say that having a virtual meeting is excruciating. Much of what we do at meetings is the networking and the making contacts with other people, and then that leads into projects or papers or new ideas and things like that. So when you remove that piece, it's just sitting in a Zoom meeting for hours. I did that for 8 hours on Monday, and it was horrifying. So I feel like when my students say that we don't understand what it's like to do that, I think indeed we do. The other thing that, and I'd be interested in everyone's opinion on this, is I keep getting many things that talk about what people should be doing with all their free time. And I'm not even really understanding that because I haven't had any at this time. Anyone else have this problem?
Who has free time? Raise your hand. Oh, no hands, guys. We don't have any hands. Please.
What is this free time you speak of?
Wait, are you hearing this from teachers?
I feel that in some ways I have less time now than I did before. Even cutting out a commute.
Definitely. I would love to do an adult coloring book or a puzzle or something. I don't know.
This goes back to something I actually started teaching my students about behavior chains. And when you think of all the little steps that are involved in one thing, if you're getting on a Zoom meeting, you get up, you log into your computer, you backspace and retype in your password because you rushed through it and you typed it wrong. Then you go to your page, then you open the thing, and then you log in. There's so many little steps that you don't realize. Sure, they're micro mini as one unit, but you put them together. It's been a learning experience, though. Now you know how to do those things.
In case of another apocalypse, right? Yeah, absolutely. Totally ready. I have been hearing I am a student. I'm also an educator for the elementary school side. So I have heard from students where they're like, I'm so bored, and I don't know what to do, and I'm gonna be home way longer, so now I'm trying to find these little things to do, and teachers are running like crazy to figure out how to make sure that students are just getting their homework or having access to the link that they just created that they don't even know if it's really working. And then the time zones thing. And then even, Grace, you were talking about students with disabilities. That's a whole other layer that I don't think people are even thinking about right now. So can you touch a bit on that?
Sure, I can. So aside from teaching the two courses that I do, I work full time at the Center for Excellence in Disabilities. And so I mainly work with individuals with disabilities across the lifespan. And so my work is rooted in disability theory, social justice theory, and then my own music therapy orientation is more cognitive behavioral, but a little bit eclectic. And in the classroom, college classroom, I do have students with academic accommodations. And so if you think about the things that you might encounter in a typical college classroom, whether it's requiring a note-taking device, extra time on tests, transcripts of lectures, videos of lectures, things like that. And you remove all of the in-person interaction and you put it online. So it's very different. And something we were talking about too is the necessity of the technological tools has also highlighted resource droughts. In West Virginia in particular, a lot of our folks live in pretty rural areas. One of my students had to, quote unquote, drive into town an hour and a half away to upload an assignment. And when she told me that, I said, okay, you shouldn't have to do that. Let's figure this out. So it's really been a challenge to make sure that I'm not spoon feeding and I'm not pushing my own boundaries and doing too much, but I am giving enough, multiple opportunities that work for people. So I'm not sure if anybody else has encountered this, whether it's troubleshooting tech issues, whether it's you need to reformat the file, or my computer broke and we're on a fixed income and I live out in the middle of nowhere. What do I do? Mm-hmm. Has anybody else encountered any of these issues with students?
Absolutely. And just the variety of accommodations for students, be it extra time on exams or other kinds of accommodations, and how you do that when you're trying to deliver this all virtually through some of these platforms that aren't designed with that in mind, right? And so this does create a huge a challenge to continue to provide a kind of accommodation. And I think about the fall, and there's lots of discussion about what higher education will look like in the fall and if we let students back on campus. And how do we continue to protect students who may have pre-existing conditions that make them, more sensitive to coronavirus, at a higher risk? And so this is, I think part of my concern is, I think faculty are going to be spending so much time this summer getting ready for all the possible scenarios of fall. We're going to be exhausted before the semester even begins, right? And so we're going to have a whole fall semester ahead of us, and who knows what it might look like. But we never got a chance to rest from the spring, because all fall we've been prepping and doing the resolution from the spring, and preparing for all the scenarios that, we're going to have an exhausted faculty going into the fall. And so I think one of the things we need to do while taking care of and prioritizing taking care of our students is also taking care of ourselves and being, how can I make sure that sometime this summer I take time to recharge and as much as possible prepare myself to go into that fall semester.
Yeah, are you guys doing anything even now to like literally recharge in the midst? I mean, some of you guys have already finished finals, but you also teach summer classes too. Have you guys had any kind of just, I need to step away and do something completely unrelated to all of this, or has even having students from different time zones maybe affected you guys in any way?
So one thing that I do every single day is, normally when I'm at work, I eat lunch with a group of colleagues every day. And I keep doing that now. It's the best thing I'm doing on Zoom every day, is we just pull up and have our lunch group. And that's nice, to still be able to connect with those people. I feel like I have the exact opposite situation of Jennifer, and that I'm an extrovert. And so I thought I would hate working from home, but I feel like I'm getting plenty of interaction with all my Zoom.
Yeah. How about
so I'm
you?
kind of liking it, that part.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you, Hassan? Is that something that's affecting you, or just, you're married, and so it's like, how do I just step away? Maybe me and wife time, or just, things that you have to at some point kind of take a mental break from even the word pandemic or coronavirus. What are you doing to kind of recharge yourself in the midst of everything?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, now I actually the class has finished, and I've finished grading the papers and everything, so I can sort of breathe a sigh of relief and take a little breather at this point. But during the class session, I would definitely try and take time here and there to, watch a movie with my wife, or I have a YouTube channel, so I'll just do a live stream and I can like talk to people and just kind of get that connection, I think. And so that's definitely helped as well. Just find ways to, because I'm sitting at this desk working from home, and then I would log into my online class, or be doing lesson planning. I'm just at this desk all the time, and I was kind of tired of it, so I wanted to like step out of the room and do something, just to really take a breather, and because I, even working in a health system, I'm hearing about COVID-19, and then I come and teach a class about health IT, and so that topic comes up, so you just hear it all the time. You just feel like you can't get away from it. So I definitely tried to force myself to take some breaks here and there.
Yes, it's so necessary. Anthony, can you touch on what we were talking about earlier as far as like different tools or different ideas that
so I kind of feel like Superman.
Okay.
Where if you watch like a show like Smallville or something, it's like, the story arc, he fights this villain, and in the process of fighting the villain, he like unlocks one of his new powers, right? So it's either like the laser eyes, or like he flies for the first time, and or like Batman, like he has some new tool in his utility belt. And I feel like all faculty right now are superheroes, and we're just like unlocking new abilities.
Yes.
Where it's like, oh, we have these new powers of how we can deliver and how we can educate, and it's kind of neat. It's like we're Wonder Women and Superman, and and so we can come back and hopefully continue to implement those new tools. My concern though is I think some look at what's going on right now and they're like, wow, technology is this really awesome thing to allow us to, deliver education in a more efficient way. And I think sometimes we forget that technology is not a substitute for faculty expertise and human care. And so some people see technology as fix-all, especially when you have to make financial decisions. And it's like, oh, we don't need so many faculty. We can just use this online system or whatever it may be. But I polled my students the other day, and they are all 100% are so eager to be back in person with that human contact, And so I think sometimes we, while it's really exciting that we get to try out all these new tools and we have these new powers that we can use in our teaching, we shouldn't fall into the myth of thinking that technology is a replacement for the people that are behind education.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Anthony, I can speak about that too, especially with the in-person interaction. The time before and after class was when students could come up to me and ask questions, or share something neat that they learned. And I've really been missing that interaction, and I think they have too. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, Zoom does not provide a very good way to wait in line to talk to the teacher afterwards, because if you wait in line with the rest of the line sitting in on your conversation. And most students don't want the whole class listening to the conversation. So that's been, from the student perspective, that's been, I'm in an online class naturally, but there are more questions popping up right now because of coronavirus. And so that sense of waiting in line in a class has amped up in my classes, and it feels really weird. So I can't imagine students who have been only doing in person, who don't want everyone else to hear what they're talking to the teacher about, waiting in line and the rest of the class being there to hear it.
And I think it also centers the class very much as like the connection between the professor and student. And you forget that so much of learning is between student and student. And there's this whole hidden curriculum of the experiences students are having, the conversations they're having in the dormitories, over lunch, the identity formation that takes place when you're part of this group, the social bonding, the networking, and all of that is become very much lost. And while there may be some ways we can try to recover elements of it, it's not the same as being immersed in a scholarly community that's transforming you into this new professional identity.
Yeah, and I think also, even if you try as much as you want to design your online class around that, you're still limited by the limitations of technology in terms of Wi-Fi connectivity issues. And like we would have our online class session, in the first couple sessions, some students had their cameras on, but over time that would drop. And it's not something that I could also push, because many of them were struggling with connection issues periodically too. And so inherently, just by not even seeing each other's faces, you lose out on that connection as well. And so, I would encourage them as much as possible to use the chat feature in WebEx that we use to like even have little mini conversations amongst each other that were semi-related to the class, but just to get that interaction amongst people. But even then, it's still not going to be ever a replacement for that face-to-face interaction.
Absolutely agree. And music therapy training, that in-person live feedback is so important. The two big assignments that had to move to online were in-class labs, where they facilitate and mock music therapy intervention with their peers, role-playing and acting. And under normal circumstances, I could get feedback right in the moment, and they could apply that immediately, and it would be a learning experience for both that student and their classmates. And while they were able to, while I set it up where everybody could upload a video, and then for participation they had to comment below one positive thing, it's still, I would still be sending feedback after the fact. So we didn't get to experience those little tweaks or touches. And I know that music, that my discipline is a little bit unique, because it involves instrument play and techniques and positioning and all of that. But I know there's got to be, with labs or research, those things that you don't get in the moment right when you need them. There's a latency. And so I'm even curious about what research is going to come out about the latency with this, interaction and feedback.
Wow.
So I think for us, we're pretty fortunate in that 4 years ago we adopted a program where every student gets an iPad. So we feel like they have one tool for sure, and those that stayed in their apartments nearby, have that. But many students have gone home to their families, which may live in rural areas that don't have good connectivity. But I think the most dramatic thing that I've seen is a former colleague went to a community college network. And she's like, we're not doing online learning. We are doing a distance program, because we have so many students that can't access stuff, because of course, you have students that have bigger financial challenges or distance challenges when you're in a community college system. So they're actually sending out packets of physical material to students to work on, so they aren't getting behind. And I think that's something that in higher education, I hadn't really thought about being an issue as much as with K through 12.
Right. That's really amazing what teachers, professors, lecturers are doing all across the U.S. and even the globe, and trying to do their best to make sure that their students are still getting the best out of their education. And maybe it's not as evident the mental gymnastics you guys are doing in this process to come up with, be innovative about research, bounce off of each other, and trying to still allow the students to feel like they've walked out of their college experience, their professional school experience, saying like, I got exactly what I signed up for. And that is going to be a feat until we figure out this virus. But what you guys have done so far, kudos to all of you. I want to affirm each and every one of you. I want to affirm your colleagues as well that are listening to the podcast, that are maybe feeling like what they're doing isn't enough, it's not smooth, they're getting complaints every day, but just trust that what you're doing is going to get smoothed out later as you go, as you build, as you process, as you come up with other ideas based on the conversations you have with each other. And that's the whole purpose of even doing this episode, is so that way other educators don't feel very alone in this process or feel like they are completely just they just feel like they've lost the grip of their classroom. And it's been a unified feat. It really has. And so I just want to say hats off to all of you and your colleagues for this. What advice or words of encouragement do you have for your colleagues or to students who might be listening to this episode, who just need to hear from the educators on this time? How about you, Grace?
Sure. I think something that can speak to a couple of those, the reason why we're bending over backwards and changing things is not just to make sure that we maintain the integrity of our coursework and professional profile, but for our students. We miss them. We miss you. And going back to something that Anthony brought up about self-care, compassion fatigue is real. And we're not wanting parents and students to know that we're not just giving you busy work. That's the last thing. And it's really easy to give busy work online, but making sure that you do get the education you deserve. And we want what's best for you, and we're trying to make that happen. We are so sorry that your spring did not go the way you planned, but even though we're apart, we're still here for you and here for each other.
Yeah. How about you, Hassan?
Yeah, I think Grace said it very well. But I think, the biggest thing is just making sure as well that you have that open line, that connection with your students. So this goes both ways in terms of faculty, just of course offering whatever ways to connect with students, whether it's via emails, phone line, discussion forum, something to be able to get that feedback from them and see how things are going. And then on the student side as well, don't be afraid to reach out. I know it's a little harder, as we kind of talked about earlier, where you can't just get up after class and talk to your professor, but I think faculty are trying to adjust during these times, but really want to make sure that students' voices are heard. And so, feel free to reach out if you do need anything, because I think we're all here to help support you and ensure that you are successful. Absolutely.
Yeah. How about you, Jen?
I second what has already been said, as well as showing your humanity to your students. I actually took some time prior to all of the online switch because I knew it was coming. I mean, didn't have official word or anything like that, but you could observe what was happening and you knew something like this was going to happen soon. And so I took some time and just talked through, here's where the course I teach has a big component on information literacy, one of the courses I teach. And so I talked through, here's good resources for you. Here's some things you can share with people. This is what we know about this. This is what we don't know. Just some really good base information, and also just, hey, this is what we're dealing with. And then when we switched over, I'd always make sure I always ask them how their week is going or how their weekend was. And so I tried to continue that in the online class. It didn't work as well, but instead, what I would do is just kind of throw things in the announcements or just talk about things I'd been doing. It was like, oh, hey, this week I learned that I can grind coffee beans in my food processor, so I have coffee again, and it's very exciting. And no one ever said anything about that directly, but just the students seemed more apt to open up after those things were said. And so just showing that bit of humanity that, hey, I'm struggling with this too, and learning all of these things I think was really helpful. And also to colleagues, just being able to other people that you work with, just being available. And I've had to reach out to other people for help with things that I know I'm not very good at, and I've been asked for help on things.
Yeah. How about you, Anthony?
Yeah, so I want to echo what Jen emphasized there about the humanity. I think oftentimes when we are in these places of moving higher education to a remote delivery model, we're thinking about higher ed as a product. And so we start thinking of ourselves like an Amazon distribution center. And it's like, we got to get the products out. We have to get it to the household. We have to do it efficiently. We have to have high customer satisfaction. But I think this is not what higher education is. And maybe I have too classical of a view of education, but I believe fundamentally education is doing something that involves humans. And I believe technology at its best is not a substitution for, we can never replace professors with drones, even if we can replace delivery people with drones one day. I believe what technology does is it frees us to spend more of our energy investing in our students, pouring into them, right? And so I think rather than thinking of, technology is going to be the new, no, technology is in the background. That's just facilitating the very human thing that is education. Education should remain a very human thing. And so I think that as we think about, how do I protect my own humanity in this as a faculty member, as someone involved in educating? How do I respect my students' humanity? How do I view them as individuals who, in addition to needing academic support, need emotional support, need to be treated as whole persons, right? And then how do I guard the humanity of my institution? Right now, recognizing that my institution may be thinking about how it's going to transition for the future. How can I make sure it remains a very human place as well?
Oh, thank you. How about you, Melody?
So I have been amazed and inspired nearly every day by something creative that my colleagues have come up with. So I think there's a lot of talk right now about people being essential, and we should never doubt that we're essential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you guys are. You really are. And I want my advice as being on both the education side and from the student perspective is just kind of echoing what Jen was saying, that honesty and that open line of communication that you may or may not usually have with your students, I think at this time is more appropriate than ever. I've had professors in some of my public health classes who have decided that we're going to start off each class saying something that's positive, that we're excited about, something that's happened over the week, so that way we can at least start off with something. And then if we really want to talk about something that maybe was negative, but maybe shed a positive, maybe funny spin on it, then we'd share that. But just to give us this ambiance of we're literally all doing this together. It's not like us versus you, or we're up here, you're down there. There's compassion, there's connection, and I think that level of honesty from my professors has been refreshing to me as a student who sees my world changing and evolving, and realizing that I shouldn't be as frustrated with my teachers when they don't get my assignment graded when they said that they were, because I know that this is not the only thing that's happening for them anymore. There's so many other things going on behind the scenes. So I even need to give more grace in how I email my teacher or reach out to my teacher or talk or question things from my teacher. And so just continue to remember that, guys, that this is a heavy, confusing time. There's a lot of moving pieces that have not stopped moving. It may seem like they've stopped moving in some areas, but they really haven't. And so take it day by day, breathe, stay connected as best as possible, and know that your educators really, really do care for you and miss you and still want you to get the best out of the education that you've signed up for. So honestly, guys, this was an amazing amazing conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I learned a lot from each and every one of you. And I want to thank you guys for taking the time to talk with me about this and to talk to my listeners about this, to kind of help them process and maybe figure out more things on their end for what they can do for their students, and for students to process more of what their teachers are going through. I will get your contact information to put in the description of the podcast, so that way if students or other educators want to reach out to you guys, ask more questions, maybe get more ideas, that they'll have access to that. And thank you all for listening to today's episode. If there are any other topics that you have heavy on your heart that you would really like discussed here, this is the platform for that. So you can reach out to me on either Facebook or Twitter at First Paso. And if you are an educator and you relate to anything that these educators have said about their experiences and what they've gone through, send those to me so I can read them in a future podcast episode. So it feels like we're all kind of learning from each other and supporting each other and connecting with how everyone's processing what we're all going through at this time. And you all take care. Guys, I will see you guys soon, hopefully post-COVID at some point that has nothing to do with the camera. That would be great. But until then, you guys also take care, and thank you for coming. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.